Well, welcome. And we are here again for our next In Conversation with Jenny and Mark. So, do you want to say hello, Jenny?
Hello to everybody.
Thank you so much. Well, you're obviously listening. So, thank you for listening. Thank you for those who've returned to listen again. And if this is your first time, then welcome. It's really good to have you with us. Please let us know if you have listened. We know some people are actually listening, which is a surprise to us, isn't it, Jenny?
It's a bit, yes.
We're not just speaking into the void. Some
Fancy
people
listening to us.
might actually be listening to this nonsense. Anyway, so we're going to be about half an hour. We're going to look at the passage that's set in the lectionary readings for Sunday, the gospel reading. We're going to have a bit of a chat about it. I've read a commentary. You read something else, didn't you?
Yes, I've read a bit of Working Preacher and some previous sermons.
That's cheating.
Uh,
Anyway,
but
I
I
read a
have some
commentary
questions.
sort of in between dozing this afternoon, or being dozy, probably more to the point. Anyway, so I'm going to share the screen, which is going to have the reading on it, and we're going to read it from there. So if you are watching this on the video, you'll be able to follow it on just for a little bit. So tonight's passage is Mark chapter 9, verses 30 to 37. So Jenny, shall I read those first couple of verses, and then you can read the next four verses or
Yes.
whatever in that little section? Okay.
Yep, let's do it.
So this is Mark 9, reading from verse 30. They went on from there and passed through Galilee. Jesus did not want anyone to know it, for he was teaching his disciples, saying to them, "The Son of Man is to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him, and 3 days after being killed, he will rise again." But they did not understand what he was saying and were afraid to ask him.
Then when they came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they were silent, for on the way they had argued with one another who was the greatest. He sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "Whoever wants to be the first must be the last of all and servant of all." Then he took a little child and put it among them, and taking it in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." Right.
Perhaps a little bit of context might be helpful. So if you were with us last week, or if you went to church last Sunday and they were using the lectionary, you will have known that there was a whole discussion about Jesus and his disciples at Caesarea Philippi, and all sorts of stuff around that. Anyway, obviously the story has now moved on, and we've jumped over a bit. If you're eagle-eyed of you might have noticed that last week we finished at the end of chapter 8, but now we've jumped through. We've for reasons best known to the lectionary compilers, we've missed out 29 verses and are picking it up again at verse 30. I think the answer to that is the bit that we jumped over is the transfiguration, and that is dealt with at another time. So I think that will be the reason why they've jumped over those 29 verses. So when it says they went on from there, in a way, we're moving on from Caesarea Philippi and the Transfiguration. And as we were saying last week, we are moving now towards Jerusalem, although we're traveling back through Galilee, aren't we? Which you've been to as well, haven't you? Because you've been over there quite a few times, Jenny, yeah?
Oh, yeah, and it's still heading towards Jerusalem. It's the right direction. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the commentary that I was reading, in a sense, was saying that, at least in this section, because they are moving south, that they're essentially, this is like going home. So Capernaum was, I think, pretty much home for Jesus, if you sort of read through the Gospels, wasn't it? Is that your understanding, really?
Yes, there are lots of little villages all on the edge of Lake Galilee. And I don't think Capernaum itself wasn't home. It was a little bit further round. But yes, it would be one of those little villages that he used to frequent quite a lot. And they all knew each other, I would imagine, because they were all fishermen.
Yeah, so they're going home in a way, but they're also on a journey, because the narrative has definitely turned, hasn't it? From the reading we were looking at last week towards Jerusalem. So again, and they're walking. One of the things I was talking about when I was preaching on that sermon last week was the whole idea of actually you can have really good conversations when you're walking together, can't you? I mean, we like walking together sometimes, don't we? Sometimes walking around Maysbrook Park with a dog, which we have, but quite often it's just nice to go for a walk and you can have a good chat. Is that fair enough?
I think they did a lot of walking around. Although, I mean, we'll probably get to it. They weren't all walking together, were they? because otherwise he would have known what they were all discussing.
No, I'm sure we will come on to that in a minute, won't we? Because yeah, there seems to be, and again, was he sort of given a supernatural insight into what they were talking about, or was he just overhearing? I don't think we're ever quite sure, are we? But anyway, I'm sure we'll come back to that in a minute.
It made me wonder how many of them there were, because of course we only know about the 12, but there would have been many, many more that aren't mentioned. And when it says he's walking with his disciples, I'm assuming there was a big crowd.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Actually, you're right. We tend to think just of the 12, but yeah, often there were many others we know from other parts of the Gospels that accompany him as well. Anyway, so they went on from there, wherever there was Transfiguration / Caesarea Philippi, and passed through Galilee. And again, we get this sort of thing that just reoccurs again and again, don't we? He don't tell anyone what's going on. What do you think's going on with that? What's your take?
The whole of Mark's Gospel is one great big hide and seek, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, there is a lot of that. I mean, the whole book's written about that, haven't they? It's a big thesis about that.
It's all you hear, isn't it? He's trying to escape from the crowd. He's trying to hide. Don't tell anyone. I want to be secret. And they just keep finding him out. It's one great big game of hide and seek.
Go on. Why do you think Jesus is doing that?
What at this point? Why did I? I think it's dangerous. I think it's dangerous. So he's made this big claim. Oh, Peter's made this big claim about him, Caesarea Philippi, and then they know he's already talking about how he's going to suffer, how he's going to die. It's dangerous, and it needs to all happen in the right time, I suspect.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. Peter's made the claim about it, and Jesus for sure hasn't refuted it, has he? He didn't say, no, you're getting that wrong. That's not right. He definitely he accepts Peter's designation of him on the side, doesn't argue with him. He argues with him about something else, but he doesn't argue with him about that, which is, No,
I think it's very much, yes, you're right, and it's going to cost you, and it's going to cost me, and it's going to be messy, really. But
so yeah, it's definitely something about the right time, isn't there? And that's an interesting thought, isn't it? There has to be the right time. Doesn't Jesus say somewhere else, he can't die outside of Jerusalem. It has to be in Jerusalem. It's going to happen, doesn't it? It has to be there, and it has to be at the right time.
Yeah, it does say it somewhere, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it is always the plan. It is.
Yeah, which raises some interesting questions in itself, doesn't it? Anyway, the Son of Man is to be betrayed. He's reiterating the stuff that I talk about at Caesarea Philippi, isn't he? It's very much, this is what is going to happen. This is where this is going. You need to get on board with this team, because this is where we're going now. You've got to get on. You got to go get with the program. Must have been really hard for them, isn't it? Must have been really hard for them, don't you think? Put yourself in their shoes.
Well, yes, I always think it's really hard for us now as well. Nobody wants to hear that it's going to be costly, and for them, it's going to cost them their lives, actually. But yes, nobody wants to hear it. I'm just surprised. Am I surprised that they didn't understand it? It couldn't have been more obvious. But I'm guessing it was so outrageous that they can't quite believe it, or don't want to believe it.
Well, again, I think we're so used to the story. I was thinking, we're so used to the story, aren't we? We're so ingrained in us, and we know it so well that this is where it's going. Although I don't think we even begin to sometimes still work out what the real implications of that are. But anyway, we know that this is where the story is going to go. And, so we know, of course, we know he's going to go to Jerusalem, he's going to die, and he's going to rise again. Yeah, we know all that. We know how the story ends in that sense. But, they are
that benefit, but also they had the benefit of being friends with Jesus here on earth and seeing these miracles and hearing his teaching firsthand. I mean, I realise that we've got the hindsight, but even so, who did they think he was if he wasn't this person? Were there other people doing this stuff?
I think there were quite a few people going around. I mean, that's one of the interesting things. I think there were quite a few people going around saying, I've just got Life of Brian in my head now, which is really unhelpful. But
yeah,
there's a lot of people going around saying I'm the Messiah. So sorry, really unhelpful reference there in my head. But anyway, but there were a lot of people making those sort of messianic claims. Yes, that's my understanding of it. Or at least if they weren't making them themselves, they were being put on them. If they was slightly sort of charismatic leader, then, you know, people were wondering, as we get that sense in the gospel, who is this person? Is he John the Baptist? Who is John the Baptist? One of the prophets? You know, is it Elijah? There was a huge amount of that sort of expectation around, wasn't there? So they didn't understand what he was saying, and I kind of, this is a bit enigmatic, isn't it? And they were afraid to ask him. They don't want to talk about it. What are they frightened of, do you think?
Oh, don't ask me. What do you think they were frightened of?
I mean, are they
Don't you
frightened?
try and lead this conversation and just.
Are they, well, okay, I'll give it a go. Are they frightened of his reaction? Is he going to be cross? Are they frightened because of the implications of what he's saying? Are they frightened because of what it's going to mean to them, or just, you know, they don't want to appear stupid? I mean, there might be all sorts of reasons, aren't there, why they're afraid? You know, oh, let's, you know.
Afraid is quite an interesting translation. I don't know where, I haven't got any other translations with me, because you wouldn't have thought they were frightened of him.
No, you'd kind of hope not, wouldn't you? But, you know, I mean, well, you can be with leaders sometimes. You don't always want to ask them things, do you? What sort of reaction am I going to get? Even if you like them and respect them, you can still have that slight sense. I don't want to upset them.
Although actually, if you go back, of course, Peter has questioned him before.
Yes.
And he had the whole get behind me, Satan.
Yes, well, that's true. That's true.
So,
I don't really want to go through that experience again.
I mean, it's a little bit off-putting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm just trying to answer your question about the translations. I've got my phone app here, so well, just the message just has, they didn't know what he was talking about and were afraid to ask him about it. So I think it's the same sort of deal. I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You know, Peter might be thinking, well, that stung a bit, and they would probably, they would have seen that, wouldn't they? I mean, I think that was
they would have heard that. So I think maybe maybe that's the answer. I mean,
yeah, I don't really want to go there again. I don't really want to, and
last time we asked it wasn't that.
Yeah, last time we asked it didn't work out so well for us. I mean, I guess, you know, it's not really again, it's a challenging image of Jesus for us, isn't it? It's actually quite a challenging image for us about him. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of Aslan in The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, actually. It's just sort of thought that comes to mind. You know that phrase where they go, he's not a tame lion. Do you know this?
It's like,
okay, so Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, allegory by C.S. Lewis of the Life of Jesus. You've not read it, great book. In fact, I did a school assembly at St Margaret's School this morning, and I asked them what their favourite book was and what books they'd been reading over the summer, and they'd all been reading The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe and the stories from the Chronicles of Narnia. It's like, wow, that's amazing, because I'd actually put that on as was going to be my favourite book from when I was a kid, so we talked a bit about that. Anyway, Chronicles of Narnia, Aslan the lion, the kids ask him, or say to somebody else, can't remember exactly who, he's not, is he safe? That's right. Is he safe?
Yeah, I do know.
Yeah. And they go, he's not safe, but he is good. And
yes, it's the beavers, isn't it?
It's the beavers, isn't it? Is he safe?
Of course, he's not safe.
The lion, but he is good. And I even just say that now, I get kind of goosebumps. It's like, oh yeah, something about that, isn't there? And actually, maybe there's some part of this in Jesus' character here. No, he's not safe. He's not safe. He's not safe to be around, is he? But he is good. I think that's something really powerful in that.
And I think that's something, I mean, that's similar to what I was preaching last week, but something we often forget, that this is a spiritual battle. It's good over evil. I mean, and that is something that we're drawn to. If you just look at The Lion, Witch and Wardrobe, if you look at Harry Potter or The Lord of the Rings or all those kind of things, those stories that we like the battle of good and evil, and good to win over evil. And yet we often just kind of filter it down when we get to church, and Jesus is very nice and we should be very nice too. And I don't know.
Jesus wants me for a sunbeam. That one, yeah, kind of idea. I'll be a sunbeam for him.
I'm not old enough to know that.
I would sing it to you, but you know.
But we do, don't we? And actually, sometimes we shy away from preaching the battle, but actually, out in the secular world, we're drawn to that that story, that
Yeah.
kind of good over
Well,
evil.
don't forget Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, particularly, and Lord of the Rings, which you've mentioned. Not so much Harry Potter, but they are Christian allegories. Lord of the Rings is as well. And I've been watching, I don't know, because I like a bit of Lord of the Rings. So I've been watching I think I'm about the only person in the world that's watching the Amazon kind of Lord of the Rings thing at the moment. But, that whole thing about the power of evil and you can't let it go. And if you know the story, you know that no one can let the ring go, Anyway, that's by the by in some ways. But I think I'm going to preach on that on Sunday. So if you're listening to this and you watch out for that, because I'm going to think about that on Sunday a bit more, I think, from this conversation. Because when I first read that, they didn't understand it and they were too afraid to ask. My initial reaction was a little bit like us just now. What were they afraid of? But actually, yeah, there is something there, which is, coming back to the Aslan thing. He's not safe, but he is good. And what does that mean? And yeah, following Jesus is not necessarily good for your health or for your safety. It will not always lead you to comfortable places, and it won't.
No.
And I think, we're sometimes really in danger of selling it like that, selling the Christian faith like that. Come to Jesus and all your problems will disappear, as a song famously said in the 80s. But, it's not the way it works, is it? Well, not my experience anyway.
Okay, moving on, because I have a question.
Moving on, Jenny, because we're halfway through time. So
I have a question for you.
Okay.
Okay. And it only struck me this time when I read it. So he said all this, that it's, the Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of men. And they come to Capernaum, and when they were in the house, he said, "What were you arguing about on the road?"
Yes.
Why were they arguing on the road? Were they?
Yeah.
It's just struck me. Were they trying to work out who was going to take over once he died?
Maybe.
I mean, they could have just been squabbling, but why were they arguing about who was the greatest at this point? And I wonder
that's a really interesting question, actually. Jesus is yeah.
Whether this had triggered it and they were trying to work out, because I mean, he was a rabbi, as I said earlier, who'd have had lots and lots of followers, not just the 12. There would have been, he gathered people as he went. I mean, he fed 5,000, so there would have been a lot of people. Were they trying to work out who was going to take over? Because otherwise, it was all going to crumble.
Well, I don't know, maybe, but either way, it's actually a really interesting juxtaposition of these two ideas, isn't it? So you've got Jesus talking about self-sacrifice. He's going to go to Jerusalem. He's going to suffer. He's going to die. And at the same time as that, you've got the disciples arguing about who's the greatest. So we've already had a bit of Monty Python. We've had a bit of serious I got Muhammad Ali in my head now, right? I'm the greatest. All that kind of stuff. Are you too young for that as well?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really interesting thought, actually. And I don't know. We don't know. We can only speculate, but it's an interesting piece of speculation, isn't it? Why is their reaction to Jesus talking about suffering his death?
I think I've always thought of it and heard it being taught as though they were just squabbling and like they want to know who's better or whatever. But actually, that would give them reason to be arguing about this. And it's a fair thing for them to be thinking about. They've given up their lives to follow him. They don't want it all to just crumble. And I mean, clearly they don't know what's going to happen. So they're just assuming he's going to die. But yeah, so to have some kind of succession planning is actually quite clever.
Yeah. So maybe that's right. Maybe they're doing a good bit of they're doing a good bit of strategic thinking, as we're encouraged to do in the church within these days. Let's all strategize it out and, work out who's going to be in charge. And,
you're not helping, Mark. You're not helping.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because it is interesting to think about it in those terms, though, because maybe they are trying to strategize. How is this going to go? They don't really understand what he's talking about, for starters. They're not really kind of synced into what all this means. How can they be? We were just talking about that. But yeah, I think that's an interesting idea. And Jesus says that you can't. Sometimes I do sometimes genuinely think this. You can't plan your way out of this, folks. It's not the way it works.
But we just need the right strategy.
Okay, well, let's just hope not to listen to this anyway. So that's fine. But interestingly, what is the strategy? So Jesus then has what you could call an enacted parable, doesn't he? Because he gets a child.
The first must be last, the last must be first.
First must be last, last will be first.
Do you know what that reminds me of?
Okay, well, we've had Monty Python and Muhammad Ali already, so what's the third one? Or even the fourth one?
Those teachers that used to make you go sit you down in the classroom and then decide that they were going to teach from the back and you all had to turn around. So the front was at the back and the back was at the front.
Well, you obviously went to some weird school because we never did that.
You never
Although I
did
do
that.
sometimes think it when we do a baptism at St Margaret's, because the font is at the back. So all the people that thought they were sitting nicely hidden away at the back of church, and we all processed down to the font, we all just suddenly find ourselves at the front. Maybe they sat there deliberately to do that, but generally not, I don't think.
Never made to. Oh.
What?
Well, I bet you were a front row sitter anyway, weren't you? So
No, I was not. How dare you?
you were.
Certainly not at theological college, I wasn't. We used to sit in the back row. Anyway, yes, okay. So I was thinking about this phrase, and one of the things that as you know, obviously people listening to this, you know, I've been reading Tom Holland's book Dominion about the way the Christian faith has influenced Western thought. And I think it's easy for us to look at that passage and go, well, we don't possibly live like that, and nobody lives like that. And in one sense, that's true. I think if you look at, you know, anyway, political leaders who I can certainly mention, people running for certain offices in other countries, don't necessarily seem to think that, you know, being the least of all is the greatest thing to do and the best way to live. But one of the interesting things that Tom Holland says is that their thinking is actually really, really imbued this and other sort of Christian teaching that actually completely saturates our thought in the West. So the whole thing around, and if you compare the way we think now to the way they thought in Roman times, you know, it's completely chalk and cheese. So, for example, the fact that, I mean, I know this is very politically contentious at the moment, but thinking about things like the winter fuel payment, okay, we're targeting that at the poorest people, okay, or generally we have welfare that targets at poorest people, and we have an idea that people who are kind of, you know, should be looked after. I think Tom Holland, if I'm understanding it rightly, was saying it's a deeply Christian idea. The Romans would have thought you were mad, you know, because they just enslaved everybody, you know. So this idea of human rights and care for those who don't have is actually, he would argue, is a deeply Christian idea that saturates our thinking, even if you're not Christian. But having said that, it always seems to be in tension. I would say, I think it always seems to be in tension with the way the world is, which is still, you know, those who shout the loudest get the furthest. I don't know. That's just my thought about it. What do you make of it?
I don't understand how what you said was relevant to this passage. That's not.
Well, this idea that, you know, we should care for those who are, you know, in need, or, you know.
Well, that doesn't mean they come first, though, does it? In fact, if anything, that's the opposite.
Go on.
That's the people who are strongest taking care of those that are weakest, rather than empowering those that are weakest to be the strongest, or allowing them to be the strongest.
So what do you think Jesus is saying here then? Because I'm like, do you think I've misunderstood it then? I thought, well, perhaps I've just not explained it very well, which is perfectly possible. But
yeah, I mean, I think we fall into the trap of this false humility, particularly of course Christians as well, and church leaders. We have to pretend that we don't like one things just so that we then get them. It's thing that it's not important for us to feel powerful, apart from we do really want to feel powerful. Yeah, it's that false humility. It doesn't. We're not good enough for that.
It's really hard to put this into practice in some ways, isn't it? Because you say there's always that danger of, you know, how do you genuinely do this? You know, when, yeah, I mean, we live in we're in a church again. You know, going to get into trouble probably, but anyway, you know, we're great at titles in the church, aren't we? You know, reverentness and right reverend and venerable, and You know, where does I've never quite understood that really, other than, but I've also played that game myself, so you know, maybe I'm just a hypocrite. That's perfectly possible. But I think it.
Well, I mean, I suppose the best we can do is hope for equality or work for equality. Um, but you and I have both worked and tried to empower people that haven't been, that haven't been given those chances, and actually, it's quite difficult,
Hmm.
and in many ways idealistic. But then I think Jesus is allowed to be idealistic.
Well, if Jesus can't be idealistic, then I think we're in trouble, aren't we? So yeah, I mean, whoever wants. Okay, let's have a look at it in a little bit more detail just before we finish. Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all. And then he takes a child who, of course, again in you know Greek in the Roman
Mhm.
times, you know, children had no worth whatsoever. Takes a child and says, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." By which he's talking, of course, there about the Father, isn't he?
Okay.
So you know, yeah. I don't know. I
So
think some.
who would we take in this society? Because children aren't that worthless nowadays. Um,
No, I think that's true.
yeah. In fact, many people live their lives around their children, so it's really
Yeah,
not
again, I
nice.
think that's right. I think that's
Yeah.
true.
So who would be the person that we put in the middle and said,
Asylum seekers, people
"Mm,
coming across on boats.
yes, probably.
Oh
Yes,
dear,
I can't think of a
getting very
better example.
controversial now.
Well, I can't think of a better example because I think there are things where, if we took the homeless, if we took the addicts, um,
I think you could take them too. I think you could do that too,
I don't know. I think
but
people
perhaps
are
not quite sort of.
quite happy to look after those people. So you may be right. They would be that's the worthless, or maybe um, prison offenders who've come out into society.
Yeah.
They may be okay. So if we've got that in mind, whoever welcomes them in my name welcomes me.
Well, I think we should just sit with that for a moment, really, that thought. I don't quite know what you do with that other than go, oh, yeah, that feels a bit uncomfortable. That pinches a bit.
Does it though? Does it for us? Um, I don't think we've quite hit it, and I'm reminded here of Nadia Bolz-Weber.
Okay.
Okay, so for those who are listening and don't know, Nadia Bolz-Weber started a church in America called House of All Saints and Sinners, and it was basically a collection of people that didn't fit into churches for other reasons. So they were the addicts, the alcoholics, people that LGBTQI plus, and for various other reasons. And
Yeah.
then the church, there were only about 30 of them, 40 of them, but she became a bit well known. And therefore the church became well known and people started to visit the church and join the church. And she struggled with this because it was supposed to be a church for these people. These were the people she was sent to love and to minister to. And then it was all being changed. And somebody said to her that, and I think I've got this right, I don't want to misquote it. She's very good at welcoming the other, but sometimes the other looks like your mum and dad. And she realized that the person that actually she really struggled to just welcome into church is just a normal everyday person. He was very good at welcoming the people that other people, that wasn't an issue for her at all. But the people she struggled with were the people that just looked like her parents, just normal everyday Christians. So I think maybe what I'm saying here is for some people it'll be asylum seekers, but what we need to pinpoint is who it is that we would struggle with being in our church. And actually, I don't think it is for me the people on the boats or people coming out of prison or any of the so-called obvious choices. I'm just trying to pinpoint who it would be. I'm going to say arrogant men. They're the most thing. So put those in the middle. Because you need the one that's going to test you, don't you? The person that's
It's a
most
child testing them in that way here. I mean, not quite sure I can quite go with that in a
think
sense.
so.
You know, that's somebody who necessarily would think they were great, wouldn't they? They'd be in the argument saying, "No, I'm the greatest." You know, Jesus is trying to say this is what true greatness is, isn't he? But then how does true greatness manifest itself in a child? I mean, that's
Yeah, maybe. I was just thinking that the child was the person they struggled with, because that would be outrageous.
I think the cultural differences are hard for us to get our head around, to be honest with you, because probably need to understand a bit more about. But I mean, I think there's certainly a sense in which children were not valued in that time. I mean, I think that's pretty much as far as my understanding of it goes. I need to do some more research on it, really. But yeah, I think it's an interesting question. Is that who would you know, maybe we all answer that question differently. I think that's something that's worth reflecting on and pondering on for sure as you respond to this passage. Yeah, I think that's certainly something that's worth thinking about. Anyway, would you believe it? That's half an hour. So our time's up.
Okay.
Time's
Have you
up.
got some idea what you're going to preach on Sunday?
I think there's some really interesting things. I really like the stuff about digging into bit. Just my takeaways will be digging into verse 32. He's, you know, the Aslan stuff. He's not safe, but he is good, and that's an interesting picture of Jesus. And yes, I think some of this stuff around what's Jesus saying about the children here, and how does that really translate into our culture, and what's really great and what isn't. What does it mean to be great and what isn't it? Is a really interesting question that is interesting to look at after 2,000 years of Christian history, but I'm not quite sure further where I'll go with that. What about you, quickly, in sort of a minute? What would you take away from it?
I would want to explore further why they were having this conversation in the first place, because that really stood out to me. I like a book quote, so I might nick Aslan. Yes, and I mean, I will need to explore this bit about children a bit more, maybe a little bit about being childlike rather than childish.
Okay, fantastic. Well, folks, you're going to have to turn up at either HTSK or St. Margaret's on Sunday to hear what happens with that. So thank you so much for listening.
Thank you,
Jennie.
yeah.
And we'll be back again to do some more of this, I think. Well, we will. No, we definitely will. We'll be back next week for another one. So take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.